It's back like
Joe
you
Biden
did. And so
took
that's the question.
1,850 boxes.
But that's the question that investigators have, I think, is why you held on to those documents when you knew the federal government was seeking them and then had given you a subpoena to return them.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Can I talk?
Yeah, what's
you
the
mind?
answer?
Do you mind?
I would like for you to answer the question.
Okay, it's very simple to answer.
That's why I asked it.
It's very simple to, you're a nasty person, I'll tell you.
Can you answer why you held on to the documents?
I was negotiating and we were talking to NARA. Oh, that's a good one.
Mr. President, you won the White House in part because of high inflation. If your tariffs make prices go up...
Excuse me, we haven't asked you to speak yet, please. Right?
Okay. Go ahead, please.
You won the White House in part...
Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, you are meeting Prime Minister Modi of India this afternoon. What kind of trade and tariff relations you would like to have with India, and what's the vision for India?
Well, yeah, India traditionally is the highest, just about the highest tariff.
Boy. So we got to talk about CNN's chief propagandist in the White House, Miss Caitlin Collins, who actually got demoted to that position. But let's all remember that before Caitlin Collins became a Democrat Party CNN propagandist, she used to be a propagandist for the other side.
From our nation's capital. Caitlin, what does that mean? What's George Soros trying to do with the immigration crisis?
Good morning. Okay, so George Soros is this foreign-born left-wing guy who essentially wants to change the nature of our country. And in this data dump, one of the memos was about the refugee crisis. And they made 3 points. They think that they've been successful at influencing immigration policy across the world. They think that the refugee crisis is an opportunity to continue doing so. And they think the refugee crisis is the new normal. And George Soros is this guy who is a staunch advocate for open borders. He wants people to be able to go wherever they want, whenever they want, for whatever reason. And for him, he sees this immigration policy, this crisis, as a vehicle to further his immigration agenda.
Yeah, so fast forward till today. Caitlin Collins, she has basically been demoted to being CNN's White House correspondent, right? She is CNN's chief propagandist for the White House. And let's just say when it comes to dealing with the new press secretary, Miss Caroline Leavitt, Caitlin Collins is not having a good time, okay? Because Miss Caroline Leavitt has laid the smackdown on Miss Caitlin Collins multiple times. Like, for example, when Miss Caitlin Collins confronted Miss Caroline Leavitt over the fact that the White House has basically banned the AP from the press room due to the fact that they refuse to comply with the name changing of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America.
I don't think for you, which White House official made the decision to bar the AP reporter from the Oval Office and the diplomatic reception room last night?
Well, first of all, let me just set the record straight. It is a privilege to cover this White House. It's a privilege to be the White House press secretary. And nobody has the right to go into the Oval Office and ask the President of the United States questions. That's an invitation that is given. And there are hundreds of outlets on this campus, many of you in this room who don't have the privilege of being part of that pool every single day and getting to ask the President questions. We reserve the right to decide who gets to go into the Oval Office, and you all have credentials to be here, including the Associated Press, who is in this briefing room today.
But isn't it retaliatory in nature is the argument, because the reason that the AP was barred, which they said was because they're not using the phrase Gulf of America, they're using Gulf of Mexico in line with their standards. And so the question here is this setting a precedent that this White House will retaliate against reporters who don't use the language that you guys believe reporters should use? And how does that align with the First Amendment commitment that you were just talking about?
I was very upfront in my briefing on day one that if we feel that there are lies being pushed by outlets in this room, we are going to hold those lies accountable. And it is a fact that the body of water off the coast of Louisiana is called the Gulf of America. And I'm not sure why news outlets don't want to call it that, but that is what it is. The Secretary of Interior has made that the official designation in the geographical identification name server. And Apple has recognized that. Google has recognized that. Pretty much every other outlet in this room has recognized that body of water as the Gulf of America. And it's very important to this administration that we get that right, not just for people here at home, but also for the rest of the world. Sure.
Yeah, so I really don't understand why the mainstream liberal media and Democrats are so triggered by the name change of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. I mean, the Gulf of America sounds more inclusive, right? I mean, I'm just saying, technically Mexico is a part of America too, right? So I think that the Gulf of America would be inclusive of everybody, right? This is the type of stuff that these people claim to worry about when it comes to any other subject, right? But when it comes to this, they seem to not like inclusiveness, right? I'm just saying, these are the same people that decided that it was okay to change Aunt Jemima, right, to another name, Uncle Ben's to another name. They call boys girls and girls boys. I mean, you know, typically this type of stuff doesn't really bother the left, but because Trump did it, they're triggered. So with that being said, it's not just Miss Caroline Leavitt that Caitlin Collins is having an issue with. She's also having direct confrontations with the president himself, President Trump. And let's just say that's not going too well for her either. Take a look.
On your cabinet, sir, we saw Robert F. Kennedy Jr. get confirmed. He's going to come in here and be sworn in. Mitch McConnell has now voted against several of your nominees. He voted against RFK Jr. as the next health secretary, citing conspiracy theories. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I feel sorry for Mitch. And I was one of the people that he wanted to go to the end and he wanted to stay leader. He's not equipped mentally. He wasn't equipped 10 years ago mentally, in my opinion. He'd let the Republican Party go to hell. If I didn't come along, the Republican Party wouldn't even exist right now. Mitch McConnell never really had it. He had an ability to raise money because of his position as leader, which anybody could do. You could do it even, and that's saying a lot. But the fact is that he raised money and he gave a lot of money to senators, and so he had a little loyalty based on the fact that as leader you could raise a lot of money.
Speaking of that, this is another notable media moment that took place yesterday between Donald Trump and CNN's Caitlin Collins in the Oval Office. Listen to this.
Mr. President, you won the White House in part because of high inflation. If your tariffs make prices...
Excuse me, we haven't asked you to speak yet, please. Right? This should have never been allowed to happen. I know he's a friend of yours.
But couldn't Putin just withdraw his...
He's a friend of
today?
CNN.
Yeah, and the notable part of that, Joe, to me, wasn't Donald Trump saying that Joe Biden is a friend of CNN and Caitlin Collins. It's the fact that the time that she chose to speak out, it was before she was called upon. I believe there is decorum when you're in the Oval Office meeting with the president, and there is a time to speak, and she sort of chose to violate that?
And Caitlin Collins should know that because she was a White House correspondent during the first Trump term. And then Joe Biden comes into office and suddenly she couldn't run from that room fast enough. But now she's back to hold the powerful accountable because Trump is back in. She's there to make herself the story. She is a recycled version of Jim Acosta. Look at me. No other reporter there jumped in to ask a question. Only Caitlin Collins did because CNN wants to be a part of the story because that's worked so well for CNN to this point. Here's what I know. Since 4 years ago this time in 2021, CNN's primetime ratings, which include Caitlin Collins' show, is down 85% from that time. No one trusts that network anymore, to Trump's point.
Yeah, so I think it's safe to say that Caitlin Collins does not like President Trump too much, right? But the funny part about it is that President Trump knows this, and because he knows this, he tries his best to troll the hell out of the mainstream liberal media. And he basically came up with a pretty genius way of trolling the media in the Oval Office, because every time they walk in to ask him some silly question, right, they have to look at his mugshot.
Well, this is quite a story we have for you. This just out. It was a photo that was taken yesterday in the Oval Office. So zoomed out, it just looks like an ordinary photo, right? You see the president there with Modi, the Secretary of State, just a meeting. But when you zoom in into that door, what you see captured in that red circle is the mugshot of President Trump. Now, this is a rather interesting place. This is called Outer Oval. This is where pretty much every guest, with few exceptions, walks through. Then to the left, you see the top of a grandfather mahogany clock. And then you walk into the Oval Office, meaning just about every guest, with few exceptions, some enter the Roosevelt Room, will walk past the Fulton County mugshot of President Donald J. Trump. How is that for irony? You know, Tommy, I look at this, and there's so much symbolism here. Yeah. Because Democrats tried to destroy this man, and that photo captures that endeavor. They did not destroy him. He is hanging up the photo in Outer Oval that Democrats in Congress, senators, will have to walk by when they meet President Trump in the Oval Office.
He's trolling the trolls, and it's so epic. I love it so much, but I think it's also not even just for him a sign of resilience, but for the American people as well. That was a turning point, that mugshot. There's a reason he was so proud of it. He didn't look at it like you typically look at a mugshot. He looked at it like a badge of honor. He marketed it. It was a big moment for him in a campaign season of so many moments. But it is also indicative to the American people, so many that have felt beat down, that have felt run down, that have felt stepped on and squashed by this behemoth that is the federal government. This is also a picture for them, reminding them, hey, look at all the things that Donald Trump went through. I can get through it too. He has an army of people behind him. Republican, Democrat, Independent, doesn't matter. And that's symbolic in that photo. I think it's beautiful. I think it's great. And I'm so glad he put it there. What a reminder.
Yeah, it is a reminder. A reminder that has a different meaning depending on who is walking through the door. And for the liberal media, people like Caitlin Collins, it is a reminder that they failed, right? Their crusade against President Trump, the propaganda against President Trump, failed, right? I think it's pretty hilarious that they have to be reminded of that every time they walk into the room, especially considering the fact that Caitlin Collins has shown that she is, in fact, triggered by this mugshot.
Not only have we never had a U.S. president with a mugshot, I'm not sure we've ever had a mugshot hanging outside of the Oval Office before. But that is where President Trump has placed his from when he was indicted in Fulton County, Georgia, for his efforts to overturn the election. We learned a few days ago he is a framed cover of the New York Post with his mugshot just outside the Oval Office in what is known as the Outer Oval. Now, we discovered this when he was greeting the Indian Prime Minister. They were seated in chairs in front of the fireplace in the Oval, but just over the shoulder of his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, you could see the president's mugshot there as he has it framed. His aide and person who is his social media guru, really, Dan Scavino, posted a video of it saying, "Happy Valentine's Day" from the beautiful Oval Office. This has really become a rallying cry that Trump has used on the campaign trail. They've even put it on merch and sold it featuring his mugshot. And now it has a home outside the Oval Office as well.
Boy, you can tell that she is hurt, okay? She is super hurt. I wonder, does Caitlin Collins have a Valentine, right? Who did she spend her Valentine's Day with? No, let me find out. Her and Corinne Jean-Pierre been spending some time together. I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm just saying, okay? Caitlin Collins, you know, she is just very masculine, right? She comes off as very masculine. She has a lot of masculine energy. So I'm just wondering, you know, what's her situation. But regardless, again, the intended effect. President Trump has the mainstream liberal media wrapped around his fingers. Okay, he really does at this point. Anything that he does, they are going to boo-hoo whine and cry about it. They're going to make a big deal about it, and they're going to outrage over it. And this mugshot is no different. All they had to do was ignore it. That's all they had to do, right? All they had to do is just act like they don't see it, right? That's the thing. They're not even smart enough to understand that, hey, if we ignore this, obviously he put this there to trigger us. So if we ignore it, then he doesn't get the satisfaction of knowing that it bothered us, right? But they can't help themselves. They had to react to it, right? As the Trump administration intended. I mean, they figured out the media. I think the Trump administration, they have really figured out that, hey, the more outrage that you generate, the better, right? Just throw as much out there as you can at one time and let them react to it. And they're going to all boo-hoo whine and cry about it. Therefore, it doesn't ever seem like anything that the Trump administration does is a big deal, because everything apparently is a big deal, according to the media, including him putting his mugshot in the Oval Office. So, you know, this is what we talk about when we talk about the media and the Democrats reacting to everything, literally everything. And this is part of the reason why they don't have any credibility. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.